people are going to take up arms. And we're not going to feel sorry for anyone. We're not going to make any apologies. If one day we get into government, we're going to change the law and we're going to expropriate the land without any compensation.
We just need land.
I'm a 10 generations now in Africa. So we love Namibia, we love farming.
Imagine you have a thriving business, you are important to the country, you create jobs, the government supports you, and suddenly the same government turns around and starts to crush your business, not even taking it away. For someone specifically to break it, and you don't understand what's happening. What's happening is that politics has defeated the economy. This happens not only in Africa, but specifically in Africa. It looks monstrous because you have such poverty. And suddenly you start breaking the very industries that were bringing you income. It's so absurd that it's even mesmerizing. We are in the southern part of the African continent, in Namibia, a large country rich in resources. They extract uranium and diamonds here, and it's an agricultural country. 70% of the population is engaged in agriculture or in some related industries. Namibia has a lot of land. There are vast expanses here. The population is only 3 million. That means less than 4 people per square kilometer. It is one of the least populated countries in the world, and in this country people lack land. Look, on the left and right of the road everything is fenced off. You can get out of the car, but taking a walk is unlikely because all of this is private land. Everything is divided. These are farms. Most of the private land is in the hands of white farmers, and there are fewer whites in Namibia, 2% of the population. And black people, as a rule, have nothing. They are impoverished in their own country. The government is under pressure from the left. The left demands to start land reform. And this creates terrible tension. From Antia, yes, we are losing Jay. This is the party of the Landless Movement. It is represented in parliament, and it hopes to enter the government on this issue. Alexander, to the stimulus. And this is one of its most famous agitators, Michael Amushalev. Michael is known throughout the country. He travels everywhere. He agitates 24 hours a day. His second name is Asadam. Michael Saddam Amushalev, named, of course, after Saddam Hussein. So we move with AK. Also, Michael really loves Fidel Castro. In general, he is a pure Marxist-Leninist. He follows everything by the book. Land to the peasants, factories to the workers.
Right now, our wealth is just concentrated in the hands of a very few people. So let's first start with land redistribution, and then we start with making sure that our people have jobs. And those jobs can only come from us having factories.
Recently in the significant and important capital of Namibia, just before the general elections.
This is Windhoek prison. So this is the prison where I'm always taken when I'm arrested for my activism.
That's what I want to do, ask him as we're familiar with the place.
Yes, so this is...
So how many times were you arrested within the last year?
Last year I was arrested 3 times, and then I spent about 7 months in prison. And this arrest was due to the fact that on our Independence Day, which is celebrated on the 21st of March, we, together with many unemployed young people, we then stood up and say, why are we having this event to waste so much money while we've got issues that must be addressed? We were 3 that were arrested. 2 got bail. I was the only one who was denied bail.
Oh, because they know you too well. All right.
So it's always funny.
Leo feels that the time has come to challenge the ruling party, SWAPO. It led Namibia to independence and has been ruling for 34 years without interruption.
So as you can see, that's the ruling party's headquarters.
Oh, really?
Build it. Yeah, can't you see it?
Yes, I can see it now.
Build a
It's huge.
massive,
It's
next to a hospital that's falling apart. Imagine, that's now apparently a party that loves its people.
Whose golden statue is that?
That's the so-called founding father. They call him Sam Nujoma.
Sam Nujoma.
Yes. That's his statue with a Chinese baby.
Where's Chinese baby?
Because the building was sponsored by the Chinese.
Oh.
Yes.
Does SWAPO have connections with the Chinese?
Yes, SWAPO has serious connections with the Chinese. That's why you'll notice in this country, the Chinese have taken over every single industries.
What's most interesting is that SWAPO came to power with the same slogans. During the war for independence, they promised land reform. And after the victory, Sam Nujoma, the founding father, addressed the people and said, "Now we are the masters of our ancestors' lands." And of course, that was not true. Sam Nujoma knew this better than anyone else. Because during the negotiations with the whites about the transfer of power, SWAPO unexpectedly abandoned this demand and agreed to leave the land in the hands of white farmers. Why did they do this? This is how people live, left without land and without property. This is a camp for the poor within the city limits of Windhoek, also unfree land. There used to be a stadium here. The government relocated the homeless here during COVID and has left them here ever since. Amushalela campaigns among the poor, and there are a huge number of them in Namibia. He ventures into such slums where government officials don't even dare to go.
Do you guys have any medical services or anything?
Nothing. They don't even give us food.
Electricity? No water, no electricity?
Yes, you can.
No toilet.
Nothing.
Maar daar het jy huise wat leeg is. Dit is zoepak laat die mense sien hoe lewe mense. Want luister vir my. Come look at this.
But we cannot cook here.
These are not conditions to raise a baby.
Yeah. We are staying in a tent. We don't need a lot. We just need land. Since our parents, my mom died, she was applying for land, but she never got. We got raised here, there, here, there, here, there. We did not go to school because of the poverty that we lived inside. We were raised by the streets, me and my.
Asseblief.
Is it possible to set up some gardens right here on this former stadium? In principle, theoretically, it might be possible because it's not concrete land. They need to water it, but there's not much water supplied by the city. Maintaining a garden with purchased water is completely unrealistic. Since they are city dwellers, they are thinking of getting a job at a car wash. In principle, it's quite normal. But the problem is that since they are clearly destitute, it's written all over them. They walk around in rags, in these torn rags. Nearby, all these neighborhoods have set up patrols to watch for strangers. As soon as he shows up there, near the car wash, they immediately grab him by the scruff and tell him to get out. And one of the residents of this camp showed us that he grows seedlings right here to sell to the city residents and somehow make ends meet. And he was convincing us that if he were given land somewhere in the village, he would thrive there as a florist. Maybe yes, maybe no, we don't know.
To produce myself, to do something for my own ends. You understand? Even these flowers, these that I'm making, I'm making for myself, just to survive myself, you understand? To sell to the street, to the people.
Laat hulle iets kan doen in hulle lewe. Ken jy wat maak my kwaad? LPM? We are one! LPM? We are one! LPM? We are one! LPM? We are one! People always say there are certain countries in Africa with extremism. But what do people expect? If people are living like this, there is a few people living very well. Eventually people are gonna take up arms and start doing things that they don't want to do.
Who are these white farmers who have taken over the best lands in Namibia? They are not so easy to spot. There are legends about their wealth, which is why they are hunted. They are hunted by roaming gangs, immigrants from neighboring countries, who attack the homes of white farmers, kill them, and search for treasures and weapons. True, this is mostly in South Africa, but Namibia also has its own gangs. So you still have to look for the farmers. We were told that in a small town in northern Namibia, there is a bar for locals where farmers gather. This bar has no sign. To get to it, you simply have to go from the street through a taxidermist's workshop. The thing is, farmers really keep to themselves. They don't readily disclose their gathering places. We were told through acquaintances that you can find this particular farmer here because there's such a bar, but you won't find it easily. We'll tell you how to find it. If you just walk down the street, you won't see this bar. You don't know anything about these farms. You would never find out that someone gathers there. Well, the locals might know, but outsiders no. Here we have a meeting arranged over a glass of whiskey with Dirk Pothaiter. He's a white farmer, but he's as native and African as many black people. Moreover, he even has more rights to be called a local in this particular region than those black Africans who migrated here 150 years ago.
I'm a 10 generations now in Africa. We came into Cape Town in 1732, my great-great-great-great-grandfather. So I'm a 10th generation now in Africa and about the 3rd generation in Namibia. I've bought the first piece in 2010, so I'm actually only 14 years there now. I started in the northwest. We had a farm with my dad in the 1980s. But this is getting into inland, so we moved to better farming.
Well, Dirk by all standards, a bona fide purchaser. After all, he bought this land with money. And if there were a black farmer in his place now, there would be no questions at all. But here, since Dirk is white, he supposedly has to answer for all the sins of previous generations of white farmers. No, well, it's clear that the first colonists acquired the land not quite legally. There was all sorts of things going on. There were forceful seizures. Locals were driven out. There were some shady deals with local chiefs. In general, of course, everything was according to the laws of that unjust colonial time. That was the main shock when their ancestors were driven off the land, colonizers. And so, according to the black community, to restore justice, the land must be taken from the whites and returned to the blacks. Dirk agreed to show us his farm, but for that, we'll need to get up early, around 5 o'clock. So we'll meet at dawn.
Even.
Ondergrondse water.
Is goed hier zo. Mijn gaten is allemaal zo tussen 15, 10, sterkte 60 kubiek. Net baie goeie water.
That's just for starters. Just to start working on this land, you need to invest $15,000 to $20,000 in wells, fences, and roads. Dirk raises cows on this farm. Namibian beef is famous worldwide. It is eagerly bought in Europe. It's quiet on the farm now because Dirk has taken his animals to an auction in the city. He takes calves for fattening. Once the grass grows, he will buy new ones. He usually has 3,000 cows on the farm. At current prices, that's about $200,000.
Do you get much damage from the termites?
Yes, you can see termites plenty, and you get some damage from them. The 1 year grazing, they take that everything away.
Do they prey on the keeps too?
Yes.
Oh, that's why there's so many around.
Yeah. And there's plenty.
How big is this farm?
There's only 4 small pieces, and total is about 9,000 hectares.
Hectares is a lot. It's like 12,000 football fields. But for Namibia, that's normal. Slightly above average because the farms here are huge. But there's so little water here. Namibia is the driest country south of the Sahara. And now there's also a drought.
The worst drought we ever had in Namibia is now. All our water coming from boreholes, so we bore about 100 meters, 70 to 100 meters to get our water. And we use some windmills, and we use some pumps. Some of our houses is 200 meters deep.
In the past, when there was normal rain, when the climate was more or less stable, it was still possible. Relying on summer rains for winter, now there's been a drought. For several consecutive years, terribly dry winters. And it's really a problem. Without a well, farmers go bankrupt. Everyone is terribly hungry. In general, it wasn't like this before. Feed has to be purchased from South Africa. Vaccines too. It's a business.
a big farm. Do you employ many people?
Yes, I usually is between 60 and 120 guys that we employ. It's called cheap labor because they get a minimum salary and the only performance gets something extra. But the farming business in Namibia is covering about 75% of all the wages in the land. So.
The big problem with these farms is that the farms are huge, but they require very few workers. If you have 20 workers, you can easily manage a farm of 9,000 hectares. And that's a problem because you can't hire a lot of people. You simply don't need them. When Namibia became independent, the ruling party declared that they would buy land from whites and give it to blacks. But this was progressing at a snail's pace. They managed to redistribute 1% of the land per year.
We've adopted a stupid policy called willing buyer, willing seller.
Right.
Now here's the problem that I have. These people forcefully took this land. Now for you to say that if the people want their land back, they must buy it back. That's like a thief coming into your house, stealing your properties, and then you must buy back your properties that has been stolen by a thief.
Well, people may say, this is like, maybe you got to the worst places, but you don't show what real life is.
Yes.
How big is this problem? How many people actually live in conditions that we've just said?
Over 1 million people live in such conditions. And you're going to see it now for yourself. It's like, it goes on and on and on and on.
So you propose sharing, dividing land into plots and give it as ownership to people?
Yes.
Is that what happened in Zimbabwe?
Precisely what happened in Zimbabwe.
And you have shown, I was just waiting for the word Zimbabwe to be mentioned because Zimbabwe is the most extreme case, neighboring country. In 2000, President Robert Mugabe decided to finally resolve the issue with white farmers. And he incited his supporters against them, who came to these farms. They gave the whites half an hour to pack. They drove them out, some were beaten, some were killed, and they also killed blacks who worked on these farms. In general, these white farms were seized by former guerrillas, supporters of Robert Mugabe. Since they were former guerrillas, they did not work on these farms. They burned the farms and agriculture in Zimbabwe. It fell into complete decline and dragged down all other sectors with it. And then, to cover the deficit, the government decided to unleash hyperinflation. It was phenomenal. This case went down in all the textbooks. The inflation there was simply unprecedented. Banknotes with denominations of 100 billion and even 100 trillion. Local dollars were issued. And these notes with an enormous number of zeros were worthless at the moment of issuance.
$10 for what?
For 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. $10.
Today, these banknotes are sold to foreigners as souvenirs for the whole bundle, about $10. And as souvenirs, these notes are worth more than they ever were as money, because $10 is quite decent. In general, it all ended rather sadly for Robert Mugabe himself. He was ousted by his own supporters. And Mugabe's successor decided to turn the situation around and invited back the white farmers, promising them compensation, the return of property, and so on. Few returned. And after 25 years, what do we have? Zimbabwe is not a poor country. It mines gold. And still, the authorities struggle to introduce their own national currency into circulation. The US dollar is still in use there. Why didn't the fighters for independence in Namibia and South Africa do it? Redistribute the land immediately after victory? This is what people fought for. They took up arms. We are discussing this with a historian from South Africa, Professor Altula Simpson.
If the economy has changed and that if you simply expropriate land without compensation, you'll not just dislocate agriculture, but many supporting industries as well. You don't want to create an economic crisis. Remember that in South Africa, we have modern commercial agriculture and it's very capital intensive and the markets are, you can't just say somebody who has no experience in farming, I want to establish myself as a farmer. What has happened in many cases when people have had these land claims, they've often taken the option of money rather than land. People don't want to just inherit an open piece of land and try and make it their own way as a farmer.
All right. Local guide Andre from South Africa says that in his observations, there is also not a large number of people eager to return to their ancestral land and engage in farming there.
at university, if they studied agriculture, you know, a friend of mine told me that if they ask them what they want to do, you know, they don't want to farm, they want to work at the Department of Agriculture. You know, it's actually an insult if you tell them you're from the farm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's an insult. They don't like it. It means you're backwards. For us, it's you rich.
But still, Namibia is a more rural country than South Africa. Do people here want to get the land back? Or is it a matter of principle to expel white farmers so they don't live so well? Can you share it with me? Yes, yes, yes. No, 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 that's old. I can definitely share it with you. I have a photo. Yes, 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 it's absolutely for the photo. Indeed.
Jy het jou job verloor.
Is dit die myne of is dit die ander bakkies in?
All these years, indeed, no one has tried to take his land, but many have tried to take his cows.
We must count our cattle because we got some theft. So
who does the theft?
The guys from town, some syndicates that is stealing and taking it to Arandas or to Windhoek or to Wambeland. So,
a bull is a heavy stuff to steal. If you need some kind of truck or something.
Yeah, yeah. And what they do is they come from town, they drop the guys, they go into the bushes, they shoot a cow or an ox, and when the next car comes, they drop off, they slaughter it, and when the third car comes, and they just load it quickly and they go. About every 5 to 10 kilometers we have cameras.
Right, right.
And we got on the system the problem cars that we know that is, if we get any problems, we just phone them and then we help the police to cut the guys off.
How many police force have they got to help you?
Not enough. And usually when you phone them, you don't have a car.
Oh, wow.
So usually what we do is we catch them first and then we call the police.
They come in peace.
They eat everything. They are on the phone. They eat grass, they eat scorpions, they eat lambs, they eat anything.
Land has a very potent residual appeal to people's heartstrings. There's this idea that, you know, white oppressors have taken it over, but in many respects, it's not even that anymore. You've got multinational corporations, many of them from the Middle East, which are moving into Africa and purchasing land. There's not the individual tenant farmer thing. So there's a sort of residual identity-based discourse around land, and there's a sort of the practical reality in many circumstances, which makes it less volatile than people sometimes think.
If one day we get into government, we're going to change the law and we're going to expropriate the land without any compensation.
If we act as the Himba suggests, then white farmers were simply sent off in all directions. They were expelled from the farm, and then wherever you want to go, go there. In reality, these people, speaking of the Himba experience, moved to other countries, neighboring ones. It turns out that even after many generations, whites continue to bear responsibility for what the first settlers did. This is completely unthinkable. If we unravel this further, indeed, whites, in the 20th century, they received some preferences because the white government of South Africa subsidized white farmers. There were no others due to the flow from the gold mines, which is why they became so wealthy. But again, if we start digging into history like this, we will have to come to a slogan. Loot the looted and dispossess all the rich because they are somehow guilty. And in the end, this will lead to something even worse than what Himba was, something that hasn't even happened to you on time. Where Amushalela brought us to a camp where former fighters for Namibia's independence live today. They were trained in Angola, in Soviet camps, from where they made raids into Namibia, fought and won. And in the end, upon returning to their country, they received absolutely nothing. No land, no home. Next to their camp is the camp of their former enemies from the Himba tribe. These are the people whom, once upon a time, the white government hired to fight against the rebels. And now they have received nothing as well. Even in the slums, this tribal division persists. There are slums for the Himba, and there are slums for the Owambo. Tribal traditions do not die even here. Here Saddam bows before the elders to ask for their permission to film.
Trina. Muona? Abovi. Nawa.
Opuri.
Apombiri.
Urinawa.
Birinawa.
Ejo?
Kapena umba.
Kapena umba? Dangirikan.
Dangi muona.
Ewa.
So this is a stadium.
Yeah, used to be.
Used to be.
Sort of.
So as you can see, there's no more grass. This is what it is now. Those young people want to become future athletes, but these are the conditions that they have to train in.
Why is it in such disuse? Did they build another one instead of this one?
No, in fact, it's such a shame, ne? All our international soccer games, we must go play them in South Africa because we don't have a stadium.
Wow. Amazing, not a single one.
Not a single one that is FIFA approved. So at 1990, we literally got a country that was functional. Roads were there, schools were there, hospitals were there, power lines were there, everything was there. Now, instead of this current government just building on, what they started doing is they started building office complex for the ministers.
What they started doing is constructing a new administrative complex specifically for the ministers. Previously, the new authority made an effort to provide land to the impoverished. But what was the outcome? It's not enough just to give them land, you also need to provide them with water, and that costs money. They need to have livestock, which again costs money. Buildings, more money. And then the poor complain that they are ruined. Nothing works out, they are burdened with debts. It's unclear what, and there were quite specific examples of such transfers. For example, in Namibia, there was a farm that grew flowers for the European market. The government thought, but if we give this farm to the workers, they know what to do. They gave it. Nothing worked out because the workers didn't have capital and they didn't have connections with buyers. In short, the farm went bankrupt. Another example. There was a decent farm with 6,000 olive trees. And for some reason, it was given to the National Intelligence Service. The intelligence officers didn't water the trees. And 6,000 olive trees literally dried up. And so in the early 2000s, the government decided, what if we give the land not to the poorest, but to wealthier people, the middle class? But this left the poor completely out of this scheme, and it became quite interesting. For example, all the government ministers acquired farms. Wealthy people. Moreover, these wealthy black farmers behaved on these lands like white colonizers. Not any better. They carved out land for themselves from the state fund, from communal land. And then there were talks that all these attacks on white farmers were actually just coming from wealthy blacks to redistribute the land in their favor. In other words, the whole land story turned out to have a double bottom.
But then again, there's a risk that if people get land, they may use it as collateral for banks and then get loans and lose the land.
But then at least you had the land and you lost it, then you can't blame anyone.
Did you approximately calculate how much land every Namibian will get if this reform continues?
We have done the calculations. Each Namibian can roughly get about 12 to 13 hectares of land.
Well, here Comrade Amshalilov is falling into a petty bourgeois deviation. The fact is, Lenin determined back in 1907 that small peasant farms are inefficient. They lose out to larger ones. Therefore, during the 1917 revolution, the slogan, "Land to the peasants," did not mean that the land would be divided into pieces and given to the peasants. No, it meant the nationalization of land, the creation of large farms, which is why we eventually got the collective farm. Well, Lenin is far away. Namibia also dealt with this issue, and the Ministry of Land Resources determined that small farms are indeed inefficient. Large ones are needed. We went with the buyers to an auction where farmers sell their livestock to purchasers. Well, we were coming from afar, heard some sounds, and we thought there was some kind of rap battle happening in the distance. Because, well, it was hard to believe that this is how a livestock auction takes place. Everything was spoken at such a speed that even Eminem would be put to shame. The auction is a symbol of commercial agriculture because everything here is perfected. Everyone knows each other here, everyone understands each other, with a single gesture, with half a word, and not a minute is wasted. In an instant, a herd worth tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars changes hands as quickly as possible.
What do you think is the smallest farm that can exist to be like efficient?
Liable. I think around this area must be about 4,500, 5,000 hectares to make a living out of it. Not to get rich, but to make a living.
Because if the farm is small, then
you won't manage.
It's very good because you have to know your grasses, you have to know your brushes and your trees, and you have to understand nature and what you can put on in which area. So yeah, and you have to be in tune with a market to sell on the right time and buy on the right time.
Why do small farms go bankrupt? Why does a small farmer have no chance to survive on this land? Because the conditions are very poor, the soils are arid. No one waters or fertilizes this soil. Everything depends on the rain. If it rains, wonderful. No disaster happened. And no insurance company will insure you for this case, whether it rains or not. And this is such a fatalistic agriculture, where you just sit and watch whether it will rain or not, and what's happening with the prices is also unclear. And in such conditions, the large farms survive better. Poverty has not been overcome for 30 years. And what will change if the land is taken from the whites? Will poverty recede or will it get even worse?
So in this street, if you come here at night, you find young women selling their bodies prostitution, and they sell it for as less as $20. Now $20 is less than, it's almost like $1 US.
Here is a huge slum city on the outskirts of Windhoek. Naturally, no one has any land rights. These are city lands. 30 years ago, the authorities decided to set up a camp here for receiving migrants. They brought water here, and then everything got out of control.
It's truly impressive. Slums stretching from horizon to horizon. Everything is crammed there, completely chaotically, and yet there is some kind of system. There are little streets, some cafes, bars, but at the same time, it's absolutely impossible to improve anything there. Because, for example, a company was found that decided to install sewage there. And where will it take it? It's not entirely clear because these shacks are inexplicably here today and gone tomorrow. New ones seemingly appear. There's terrible filth, diseases, and crowds of people wandering around aimlessly.
This place is called Havana, so it's basically named after the Cuba Havana.
Right, why so? Why Cuba?
No, because remember, Cuba gave us the assistance for us to gain independence as a country. We have a street called Fidel Castro Street, obviously named after El Comandante Fidel Castro.
Yeah.
So we owe a great deal to Cuba, but unfortunately we've only been able to repay them with renamings of streets and locations like Havana.
Why do people leave villages to try find a job here?
Because unfortunately in the villages there's nothing. Most of the villages, they don't have schools, they don't have factories or industries, so people come to urban areas in the hope that they'll be able to find a job.
Now let's go into more detail about this. You see that people are fleeing from the village even though they had a plot of land there. They tried to grow something, but the harvest failed because of drought. And now people are even willing to live in these slums just to avoid going back to their plot of land in the village. And you are trying to give them more land, hoping for what? That the drought will end? Unlikely. Go to some place there. In the far distance, your plot of 9 hectares suitable for cultivation awaits you. Where is it? I'm here, it's there. How will I live there? It's completely unknown there. Maybe there's no one around and you'll be thrown into a deserted country. God knows where. We've seen such places. You're driving down the road. My God, there's just one tent standing there. How is it? There's no water. Nothing is clear. It's unclear how to exist away from the city, or at least the village.
It's too tough for me. If somebody were to come to power and say to people like Pol Pot, and they were to say to people, I've got a piece of land for you, just go and farm it, people would say, no, I don't want to go back to the countryside. I want to have a place in the city. There's not an incredible amount of demand for this land. The demand is for people to find a place in the city. The demand is for housing. The demand is for jobs. The demand is for access to services. And
so the common business in Namibia is a shabin. It's basically a place where alcohol is sold. People come there, listen to music, they drink, because it's one of the easiest businesses that you can start. And that's simply due to the fact that most of our people, which are predominantly black, are unable to get loans to start the businesses that they actually want to start. So they basically sell alcohol just so that they can be able to feed themselves and their children. So those people are unable to get jobs, and that's why they resort to becoming street vendors. Some of them, you'd be surprised if you interview them, you'll find them that they've got degrees, but unfortunately due to circumstances, they are forced to start selling products on the street. In this area, you have police officers who are living here, you have soldiers who are living here, you have teachers who are also living here. In fact, bodyguards of the presidents and the ministers, they are living here.
Yes. And the president doesn't care.
Care about what?
That his bodyguards maybe, but they might be unhappy about living in this.
But that's the thing, you know, our people, when they get trained, they are trained to condition to say that you just obey and follow orders. And that is where in most countries we see coup d'etats, because the people guarding you are also poor. And then eventually they end up overthrowing you as a government because they can see that you are not taking care of the people's needs.
Obviously, there are huge questions about the ruling party. The country is very bad with housing. The country is bad with jobs. There is terrible poverty. But how is this poverty related to the land? Not related at all, the government responds. Because it has a strategy to fight poverty, and it is clearly and explicitly stated there. Agriculture is insufficiently strong to be the foundation of prosperity. Moreover, in 25 years, most people will live in cities in the future. So the redistribution of land will achieve nothing. But that's in the economy. And in politics? In politics, people say, are you supporting the colonizers? And the ruling party is losing votes.
There are people, there's just one party, I believe, in Windhoek, who are like saying, let's grab the land from the white farmers and distribute it among local people. Do you think that's a danger?
Not in Namibia. I think when it's getting to elections, some of the guys make noises, but it never happened here because we are a big country and we're only about 3 million people, and all the people has got some connection to farming. Maybe it's a family member, maybe it's a friend. So actually I think we don't have a problem with that, and we got this relationship.
I always say we're working for the bank and for the investors. You're not making any profit. Our cars is getting old. My bakkies got now 420,000 kilometers on. But we love what we do, and we have a good life. We enjoy nature, but it's so nice to see the sun go down, the sun come up, that golden hour in the morning and the evening is very nice. So we love Namibia, we love farming.
In 2024, the left was already gearing up to storm into the government because the massive wealth inequality was terribly angering people across the entire political landscape.
In the upcoming and crucial next election, we are confidently aiming to secure between 25 to 30 seats in the parliament. We will not be surprised by this outcome because the significant and influential southern vote is expected to play a crucial role in determining the results of this election.
It was the right calculation. The youth really voted against the ruling party. SWAPO barely crossed the 50% voter threshold. This is the worst result in its history. But the protest votes went to the non-left. They went to parties with a less radical agenda. And the Landless Movement did not get 25 seats in parliament. They had 4 seats now, 5. Perhaps the prospect of becoming farmers and working on their own land is not so attractive to the black majority.
Lelo, who was with us today, how did he impress you?
Yeah, I think he was quite keen to talk Afrikaans to us, noticing that we're from South Africa. So he definitely reached out to us, and he's very young though, but he came across good to me, like a good communicator, I will say.
He would like to do it the Zimbabwean way. Do you think people like him might succeed here in Namibia?
I don't think they have the numbers to take it in force if they want to. I will not be too concerned about them, but I'll be concerned about SWAPO. Start taking land.
Just in order to, reconquer the agenda, so that
and gain some support.
That's where Andre guessed right. In the neighboring South African Republic, the president suddenly signed a law on land confiscation without any compensation. It doesn't explicitly say, let's take land from white farmers, but since whites make up 7% of the population and own 70% of all agricultural land, it's clear where this is heading. And then suddenly the US President Donald Trump started to criticize. He wrote on his social media that South Africa is doing very poorly. Right after the capital letters, very poorly, referring to certain people, meaning he is suspending all financial aid to South Africa indefinitely. And Donald Trump invited white South African farmers to live and work in the USA. But they politely declined, because even by Western standards, they have a very decent standard of living in South Africa. But notice, as soon as the ruling party began to lose its monopoly on power, it immediately threw the guarantees for white farmers into the fire. As soon as the chair started to wobble, the party immediately swung to the left. And if South Africa really decides to do as Zimbabwe did, the consequences will be enormous. It will be a revolution. And in a revolution, leadership can be seized by completely different forces. There, the leaders are without jackets and ties. And you have seen these leaders.